Good. Yes. Hi, this is Coach Geoff, and welcome to our weekly Chalk Talk session. Okay, we're talking about a bunch of stuff today. We're going to start off with doing a little bit on some sail trim details, right? So jib and mainsail trim. We're going to kind of just go a little more in depth into some of the intricacies of trimming both of those sails. We're going to start off with the jib. So what do we know about jib trim as of now? What do we know about it? Like, how do we know, what are we using to trim the jib? What are we looking at to know that our jib is trimmed properly? Yes, Tom?
Trim the jib proportional to how you would trim the main.
Correct, absolutely, yes. So you do want both sails to be trimmed the same as much as possible, right, in order to have balance to the boat, 100%. Just on a more basic level though, right, how do we know the sail is trimmed properly? What are we looking at, Luciano?
Parallel telltales.
Telltales, okay, great, perfect. So we're looking at the telltales. So, telltales. And like Luciano said, if the sail is if the sail is trimmed correctly, the telltales, so we have the inner telltales and the outer telltales, or the windward ones and the leeward ones, however you want to, however you want to remember that. But both of them are they're both parallel to each other, right? So, and then Matthew gave me these wonderful colored markers, so I can actually draw a jib that is going to look terrible, but hold on. Right, so that's our jib. This is the front of the jib. Okay, that's the back edge of the back part of the jib. So we have, let's use blue and red, right? So if the sail is trimmed properly, so let's make the blue ones our inner ones, so the ones that are closest to us, and we'll make the red ones our outer ones, so the ones on the opposite side of the sail, right? If it's trimmed properly, they're going to be parallel to each other. Okay? If they are not, this is for any point of sail, except for what? What point of sail did the telltales on the jib really not tell us anything? Running. Yeah, so running, and specifically, right, if we're completely wing on wing, right? So if the jib is on the opposite side of the main, the telltales at that point aren't indicating anything. They're not telling you, you're not looking at those to tell you whether the sail is trimmed properly. At that point, right, both sails are just out all the way, right? And you're for the jib, you're just kind of holding it out, as far as you can to get as much exposure to the wind as possible, right? But any other point of sail that you're on, so that means anything that's just below a run, right? So like a very broad reach, all the way up to close hauled, you're looking at whether your telltales are parallel or not. So, if you're close hauled, and if your telltales are not parallel to each other, how do you fix that? What does that mean? And we're assuming, so if we're close hauled, we're assuming what about the jib trim? Where are we on the jib, like trim-wise? Yes.
We're trimmed in.
We're trimmed in, exactly, right? We're trimmed in all the way. We're trimmed into our close hauled position. So, because when we're close hauled, we're trying to do what? What are we trying to do when we're sailing close hauled? We're trying to, shaking your head at this, what is this?
Go upwind.
We're trying to go upwind, right? So you have, right? So the wind's here, right? We're trying to, and you have that no-go zone. You're trying to head the boat as close to that no-go zone as possible, right? So that's why you want your sails all the way trimmed in. So, given that our jib is trimmed into our close hauled all the way position, if our telltales, if we notice that the telltales are not parallel to each other, how do we fix that? What does that mean we have an error of? Do we have an error of trimming, or do we have an error of something else? If the telltales are not parallel to each other when we're trying to go close hauled, right? The jib is, and we have our jib trimmed in all the way. Do we want to adjust the jib trim? Why not?
Because if you can't really trim it more, if you let it out, it will lose the parallel.
Yes, exactly, right? If you can't trim it in anymore because we're at our maximum level of trim, right? For what we've determined our maximum trim is, and if we start to let it out, Luciano's correct. We're going to lose power, right? We're not going to go as fast. We'll lose the you said we'll lose the parallel, which is correct, right? The sail is gonna luff, right? And also, what is that going to mean? If we let the jib out, and we're trying to go close haul.
It'll pull us downwind.
Yeah, right? And we won't be able to head as close to the wind as we could, right? And therefore, instead of sailing maybe this course, we're going to be sailing like this. And so it's going to take us longer to get to a destination, i.e. a windward mark that's upwind. So we don't want to adjust the trim. What can we adjust then?
The position that we are heading into. So maybe we're going 2 down. Maybe we have to go up.
Right, and then just basically, how do we do that?
The tiller.
The tiller.
Yeah.
Steering wise, right? We would adjust our steering. So, example. So you have two situations. So this is for, right? So this situation, what we're talking about here is when we are sailing close haul. So if we're sailing close haul and keep our colors consistent, right? So our inner telltale points up. So it's no longer parallel. So no longer parallel. I can't spell parallel. Sure. Whoops. So I'll rewrite that. But if our inner telltale is pointing up, it's no longer parallel. So our inner telltale now looks like that. What does that mean? What does that mean is happening, and what does that mean we have to do to fix it? So the inner one, that's the one that's to the windward side of the jib. Okay? Yes, Tommy.
If there's wind heading at different angles, does that mean there's twist?
So we'll talk about that in a second. That would mean what you're talking about, that's twist is certainly a thing. That's difference in how the top of the sail is trimmed versus the bottom of the sail.
Okay.
So if you have telltales, which our jibs actually do, and most jibs do also, you have telltales on the top and on the bottom. Your twist will determine whether those telltales behave the same, whether both sets of telltales behave the same or not. So we'll talk about that in a second. This is just a little more simplistic than that, right? Sailing upwind, jib's trimmed in all the way. My inner telltale starts to not go parallel anymore, right? Starts to point up. It's doing that. What does that mean? Number one, what does that mean is happening? And two, how do I fix it?